is wealth, and that's definitely something I believe in. And there's so many different things we can learn to get and stay healthy, both physically and mentally. Hi, I'm Jermaine Tan. Welcome to On the Pulse, the first episode of a brand new 8-part series on everything to do with health.
In today's episode, I will find out more about the latest in dementia research and development here in Singapore, how a memory stimulation tool can help elderly dementia patients, and flashback to my school days, how we can train our brain to remember better.
In 2021, my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. It wasn't easy for the family, but we're learning everything that we can to help her. And we're not alone.
In Singapore, about 92,000 people are living with dementia, with numbers expected to hit approximately 150,000 in 2030. Worldwide, there are more than 55 million people living with the condition, with nearly 10 million new cases every year. That's one person developing it every 3 seconds.
It's scary, but learning more about the condition has helped me and my family. And one of the first things that I learned about dementia is that it's not a disease, but rather a general term to describe the loss of memory, thinking, and other abilities that affect daily life.
There are 4 main types of dementia, with Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia contributing up to 90% of cases worldwide. Currently, there is no cure for dementia, but a new drug recently approved by the US Food and Drug Administration could prove to be the game changer. The drug was studied in a global clinical trial involving nearly 1,800 participants worldwide, including 13 patients from Singapore. The National University Hospital was where our local trial was conducted.
Hi, Professor Chen. So tell us about this new drug and what does it actually do for patients with Alzheimer's?
Before I start about what the drug does, perhaps I should explain what causes Alzheimer's disease. Many people believe that the cause of Alzheimer's disease is an abnormal protein called amyloid. Amyloid deposits itself in the brain. If sufficient amyloid accumulates, it can damage the brain, and it's this damage to the brain that causes the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss. This new drug, which has recently been developed, is called lecanemab. It's an antibody which targets amyloid. And what it does is that it eliminates amyloid from the brain. This is a picture of a PET scan. Now, what a PET scan can do is detect amyloid in the brains of patients with Alzheimer's disease. And the red patterns here indicate amyloid accumulation in the brain. And this is before treatment. So this picture shows what happens after treatment, and you can see the dramatic difference.
So what is the difference between this new drug and what's currently available on the market?
So there are several drugs available for Alzheimer's disease, which have been in use for many years. But unfortunately, they're what we call symptomatic treatments. So they can help patients with their memory and perhaps with their mood or psychiatric issues which are associated with Alzheimer's disease. But because they don't really affect the cause of Alzheimer's disease, amyloid, the effects are temporary. Eventually, unfortunately, the effect wears off. We've been able to show that lecanemab has an effect on the clinical course of the disease. It slowed progression by 27%, which means that in an 18-month trial, it bought patients an additional 6 months. And this is a fantastic result because it's a game changer. For the first time, we've been able to affect the cause of Alzheimer's disease and change its course.
Well, this sounds very promising. What's next on the horizon for dementia research and development?
I think that we also have an opportunity to try and get ahead of Alzheimer's disease. And this is because we're now running a trial, very appropriately called the AHEAD study, which aims to recruit people who don't yet have symptoms or have very mild symptoms, but who unfortunately have amyloid in their brains. So what we're going to try and do is to use the same drug, lecanemab, which was effective in early dementia, to see whether it's also effective in pre-symptomatic dementia and actually prevent the onset of symptoms. And I think that if we were able to achieve this, this would be really dramatic. We could actually prevent dementia.
It's exciting to learn about all the work that's being done to find a cure for Alzheimer's. But that's not the only work being done in Singapore.
At the Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine at NTU, the Dementia Research Center was established in April 2022 to study how dementia develops in Asians.
So Professor Kandya, how does dementia develop in Asians, and is it different in Asians and non-Asians?
In the dementia clinics, when I see patients, out of every 10 patients who walk into the clinic, 7 of them will have what we call as white matter disease.
What is white matter disease? Because this is actually the first time I'm hearing about it.
So Jermaine, when you talk about the brain, there are 2 major components. One is the grey matter and the other is the white matter. Grey matter is where the brain cells reside. White matter is the connection between the brain cells. So it's the wiring system of the brain. And white matter disease is a result of reduction in blood flow to the brain. And this occurs because of narrowing of blood vessels. So on this screen, you'll see 2 MRI scans. One is an individual with some early stages of white matter disease, and the other is a person who already has extensive white matter disease. And when we see white matter disease in the brain, that tells us that the blood flow to that part of the brain is compromised. So what our research has shown is white matter disease results in an accelerated accumulation of amyloid. So you have a double whammy, and it results in greater shrinkage of the brain and faster decline in your cognitive abilities.
Well, that all sounds very scary, right? So what is being done to address white matter disease and, I guess, Asian dementia in general?
What we know from the Western world is that while someone would have dementia at age 70 or so, 20 to 30 years prior to that, there are already brain changes. Well, what is not known is, are these brain changes identical in the Asian brain compared to the Western brain? And that is why we are assembling this cohort called the Biomarker Cognitive Impairment Study, or BIOCIS, where we actually start to track an individual the moment they have a concern with their memory. And what we do is we do a detailed cognitive assessment, a brain MRI, as well as blood tests, to try and identify what changes already are there at baseline, and then we follow them up over a period of time to see what other changes take place. So that has been the focus of the Dementia Research Center.
So what are some things that we can do to prevent or delay the onset of dementia?
And when you talk about prevention, there are 2 major categories. One is reversible factors, and number 2, irreversible factors. So for example, age or your genetic makeup may not be so reversible. But among the reversible factors, some of the key areas that we could focus is conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol, or your physical exercise levels. So these things have been shown to have a direct influence on white matter disease in the brain. So that is again something that we're focusing on, where we're developing programs to try and intervene early so that they can have a healthier lifestyle with all these vascular risk factors under control.
I will definitely be taking note of what Professor Kandya said. Given that my grandmother has Alzheimer's, I know I could be at risk. So I'll be paying attention to those lifestyle changes that can help me. But for those with already some form of dementia, something rather old school might help.
For residents of Kebun Baru, murals of some very familiar items have added color and fun. But these Instagrammable additions to 10 blocks of HDB flats in Ang Mo Kio Avenue 3 and 4 aren't just for nostalgia.
So Marian, I've heard that these murals serve an important purpose apart from just looking pretty. So what is that purpose?
So when we first started our efforts here, we conducted surveys with residents and businesses. We had focus group discussions and dialogues. And amongst the many insights that we gathered from all these sessions, difficulty in wayfinding was a point that was brought up more than once. So without these murals, all the blocks look similar. The purpose of these murals really is to help the residents with dementia relate their home to the unique mural that is drawn for the block.
So what about the design and the colors of these murals?
When we were selecting the murals, it is important that these murals are simple and easily recognizable. Complicated murals tend to confuse and there may be difficulty in recollecting the images. So we recognize themes that residents with dementia can relate to, such as neighborhood heritage, your food, or your iconic murals that can prompt memory. Maybe let me show you some.
Yeah, okay, let's go.
So we have one just around the corner.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow, this is really cute. This is Tang Yuan.
Yes, so this is an example of a mural that is painted on an external facing wall. So you'll notice that the mural is drawn a lot bigger than the block number, and there's a reason for it as well. Because as our cognitive abilities decline, our ability to remember the numbers or make it confused with the sequence of the numbers. So the focus is on the mural and not so much on the block number, so that the block number doesn't confuse or grab attention.
Dementia in all its forms may be really scary, but it's heartening to know that in so many different ways, we are tackling it head-on.
Up next, staying on the topic of dementia and memory loss, a new tool that might help. This is Po Eun-Roo, and that's her award-winning tool called Rewind.
So I want to learn more about Rewind, right? What is it all about?
Rewind is actually a platform that leverages on multisensory stimulation to prompt meaningful recollections from the elderly with dementia. So the device is actually designed for elderly who rely heavily on repetition in everyday life via sound, sight, personal habits to retain memory. So the platform consists of like a motion tracking device where the elderly will mimic or reenact certain gestures, and then through this motion tracking device, it will produce a visual and audio feedback on a pet device like a tablet or iPad to stimulate their memory.
So what inspired you to create this tool? Because as I understand, it was your final year thesis project.
Yes, so when I was searching for a topic to work on during my final year, I thought it was a precious opportunity for me to look into dementia because I have a family member who suffers from dementia. So I thought that even though we couldn't address all the issues that the dementia patients face, maybe I could begin designing in hope that I could improve their quality of life even by a little. So I started off by approaching daycare center and nursing home to really understand and also have this first-hand observation with the elderly, and also working together with therapists and the nurses to understand dementia as a whole condition. But then one thing we noticed about the elderly is that they don't really engage in the session because they don't see how doing certain actions could help them with their condition or their memory loss issue. So that's when I found like an opportunity to, design something like a tool that could stimulate their mind, but at the same time engage them in the therapy to help them recall their past experiences or memory.
And you actually have quite a number of prototypes that you went through. How did you arrive at the final design?
So when I was interacting with the elderly, some of them mentioned about like how they used to cook and they miss doing certain activities that they used to do in the past. So I started off by bringing cooking pan and kettle and stuff like that, like different objects that they could interact with. And then we realized that it was a bit too overwhelmed for the elderly because there were so many different tools and then they tend to forget how to use them. And that was why I designed something that was a simple device that could be used in like different scenarios. Rewind actually consists of two parts. So one is the motion tracking device, where there is this internal component that can be removed. Then for this internal component, it's actually the motion sensor that is inside. So once you place it in, the second part will be the app itself.
So what are all these different scenarios that you see here?
So over here, all the curated content of the scenarios was based on some of the experiences or the activities that the elderly used to do in the past.
Okay. Shall we have a try?
Okay. So maybe the first scene is the pouring scene. So for every scene, there will be a countdown. And if you mimic this gesture of like pouring, you can try.
Oh! Oh, it stops when you stop pouring.
Yeah, there's a real-time feedback. Yeah.
Hey!
So whenever you finish each scene, it will show like a scenario where it kind of like help them to recall back to some experience. Like for example, when the elderly was doing this, one of them make a remark saying that, oh, you know, I used to meet my friends at a kopitiam. And then they were saying that why not having teh tarik? So over here is more of a bigger range of motion.
Okay.
So where you have to really lift your arms, yeah.
Okay. So, but just with one hand.
Yes.
Hey! Oh, wow.
Yeah, so unconsciously, the elderly will actually do the exercises when you are doing this.
So my grandma actually used to cook a lot, so I think these will really benefit her and invoke some sort of nostalgia and memory in her. But it's too bad that this is not on the market yet. So what's next for Rewind?
So I'm actually currently working with an app developer to launch the app, and also at the same time collaborating with NTUC Health to see how we can test out with the patients to refine a bit on the design and hopefully push this product into the market so that it can benefit not just elderly with dementia, but also elderly with memory issues.
I really hope that Uru can bring the product Rewind to the market to help the elderly, especially those with memory loss, like my grandma. If a simple tool like that can help her recall fond memories and put a smile on her face, I think that's good enough for me. Coming up, my memory is put to the test. Apple, boat, coffee. How do you think I did? It wasn't too long ago that I was a student at university, attending lectures, studying for exams, but trying to remember my notes was always a challenge. One thing's for sure though, it was somehow easier when I had written them down than when I typed them on a laptop or read them from my textbook. And if you're just like me, you're probably wondering why that's the case. Well, I'm here to ask the expert. Here at NUS, the Learning Sciences Lab is investigating effective learning techniques and technologies that help with our understanding and retention of information. Professor Stephen Pan is its director.
I haven't been in a school in a while, to be honest.
Well, I hope you're ready to test your memory because I have an experiment for you.
Oh, well, I wasn't prepared for this, but let's do it.
So on the screen, I'm about to show you a list of words. And for each word that you see, I'd like you to come up with a sentence using that word and write that sentence down.
Okay. All right, I'm done.
So now I'm going to show you another list of words. I'd like you to just read those words and try to memorize them, all right? Okay, time's up. Well, at the end of our discussion, we'll test your memory and see how many words you can recall.
So that brings me to my first question for you, actually, Professor. What happens in our brain when we're writing?
So when we're writing, we're doing several things. We are coming up with ideas, we're putting those ideas or changing them into text, and then we are engaged in the motor movements to physically write out those words. Now, writing takes brain power, particularly when we're not just copying something or transcribing information.
That actually makes sense. But how different is it when we handwrite something versus when we type it out?
Well, the brain regions that are involved with writing something out by hand versus typing them out are very similar. But when you are typing something, there is a risk that you are simply sort of turning your brain off and just transcribing whatever someone is saying or presenting to you. And there's a risk with typing that you are not paying close enough attention and that you are not organizing your thoughts, putting whatever you're learning into your own words, and that can hurt your learning.
Okay, but what about reading then? How does that come into play?
So here is an image of the left side of the brain. What happens when you read is you're decoding information that you are seeing. So that's a process that involves multiple regions of the brain. You start with the back of the brain, what's known as the occipital lobe. It's an area called the visual cortex. And that area is involved in simply identifying what you are seeing, the shapes of the letters and so on. And once you've identified specific words by appearance, then it's about identifying what those words and sentences mean. And so then there are additional areas that are involved in decoding the meaning of what you're reading. And then there's a final step, which is to determine how to pronounce what you are reading. And that occurs even when you are reading silently. You're sort of mentally pronouncing the words. And writing is kind of the reverse process to reading, because you are generating ideas and then producing them, writing them for others potentially to read. So with writing, some of the brain regions that are active first involve your knowledge of language, for instance, spelling, grammar, and so on. And there are other brain regions involved in motor planning, motor execution, and coordination, which help you physically write out the words.
That's pretty interesting. But what does that have to do with our memory, right? And why do I feel like I remember things better when I write them as compared to when I type or just read them?
Well, when you write things out, that's an opportunity for you to organize your thoughts, to generate ideas, put them into your own words, and also potentially draw on your memory as you write things out from memory. And all of those things can actually help you strengthen your memory so you can better remember information later on.
So does that mean that if I want to improve my memory, I should be writing everything out?
One of the best things you can do to improve your memory in general is to exercise it or use it repeatedly. For instance, if you want to remember something really, really well, you keep a journal. At the end of each day, you also write out key notes of what you want to remember for that day. You can also, for instance, make flashcards, and then you can sort of use those to practice remembering things. Review it multiple times across multiple days. This repeated revisiting of information is a great way to exercise your memory and make it stronger. All right, now it's time to test your memory and see how many words you can recall.
Okay, so these are the words I wrote down in sentences. Apple, boat, coffee, engine, lunch, nature, opera, tree.
And how about the words that you read?
Author, cement, bone, gate, mask, object, vehicle.
You recalled all the words you wrote down, and you recalled all but one of the words that you read. And to be clear, these are just randomly picked words, and they could really be anything. But if you write them down in a meaningful way, that can help you improve your memory over the long term.
The professor actually gave many helpful tips on how to improve your memory, but the one that really stuck with me was journaling. You know, I was never much of a journaler, but I guess it's time to go buy a notebook. See you next time.